all over the car, and Kyle was able to take care of them and give us a lot easier time when it comes to doing the body work down the road. Once that was all done, it was time to get to the Now, once Mike got everything nice and pressure clean, then it was time to prep up the rest of the engine bay. Now, Juan is taking just a simple lacquer thinner here, and we started to sand down the engine bay. Then we realized that the sanding really wasn't necessary in some areas, that this paint will just come right off with some lacquer thinner. You see, some of the paint in the engine bay has like some clear coat on it, and some of it is just base coat. So what we went ahead and did is we removed all the weak paint just by rubbing it off with some lacquer thinner. And any of the areas that were a little bit tougher, well, we left those areas for sanding later on. This will help make sure that we get the best possible adhesion by putting our paint over a better substrate. And the substrate here would be the factory primer, which is what you're seeing here in the gray. So if everything wiped off in all the crucial little tiny areas, it was going to be time to really attack the areas that might have a little bit of rust. For this, it was quite simple. We used our grinder to get off most of the surface rust, and any of the areas where it was metal on metal just had a lot of surface rust. Now we were able to change the actual sanding disc to a little bit more aggressive one to remove any of the surface rust that was within some of the little pits of the metal, and this way it never rusts again down the road. Now we made sure to treat all the areas after we sanded it down with an etching primer, which we'll see here in just a moment. But making sure to take the time to treat all the metal is so important before any sort of primer. Now what we did on the paint that had a little bit of clear coat on it is we simply just took a maroon scuff pad, which is equivalent to about a 400, and we gave it a nice scuff. This is one of the most crucial parts of the preparation process, because if you don't have anything scuffed up, what can happen later on is that paint can peel. Now shout out to TJ and Mike for removing every single thing possible on this engine bay so we can get the most complete and proper paint refinish. Now we will be painting over some bolt holes and some areas that will need to be cleaned up and tapped later. This is just a part of painting engine bays, so make sure you get everything nice and scuffed up. And for areas that you just can't get any of the rust off, we use this handheld sandblaster, which made really quick work of some stubborn rust that we couldn't get out of some really tight areas. Now keep in mind, this works great, but it is a very, very messy job, and make sure you protect yourself if you plan on doing something like this, because there will be sand everywhere. Now once this is all complete, then we used a self-etching primer to make sure that none of the actual bare metal would rust in between the time that we were working. Then we got the car all rolled into the paint booth, and we were able to start another cleaning of the engine bay. You see, you can never be too clean with anything you're doing in the engine compartment, because over the years it's been subject to a lot of grease, dirt, and oil. So make sure you get in every single possible position to get all of that grime up so that your paint can properly stick. And as everything was cleaned up, we started with our sealer coat. Now our sealer is like a thinned out primer, and this will be sprayed everywhere before our base. It's going to allow our base to have a nice substrate, and it's going to allow our base to cover in just a couple of coats. It's also going to go over any areas that might have been sanded to the bare primer or just scuffed up white, and it bridges it all together and it gives it one uniform coat, which really helps out when it comes to laying down such a translucent color, which you're about to see here in just a moment. So following up all these little tight areas with our spray gun is so very important, and it's a big part of the process before we reveal our vivid blue here touching our engine bay. Now I really feel like this was a great choice for the RSX. It was between the vivid blue and the burnt orange, as you all know, but in some certain shades the burnt orange just looked a little bit too brown for me, and I really love the way that the vivid blue looked. I'm always after the OEM look, and I want to make this thing look like it came from the factory in the vivid blue paint coat. So we'll be doing our best to cover every single part of the white that was on this vehicle, from the interior to the exterior to in between every single jam, in vivid blue. Once it's all base coated, then we're going to follow it up with clear coat. Now we took it a step further and we're clear coating the whole engine bay for that OEM Plus look. This is something that does not come from the factory. It comes in a satin finish, or just like a base coat finish, as you saw earlier, just wipes off. So might as well have everything in a nice 2 coats of clear coat so it's protected, and when you pop the hood at the car show, it's really gonna look nice and fancy. Now it's so hard to get into all these little tight areas, so if you plan on doing anything like this, make sure you spray that first coat not too wet, because you don't want to run it. Painting engine bays are really tough, and you get a lot of overspray, so safety is number one. So making sure that you're using a full face mask is very beneficial, so you can not only protect yourself, but you can see what you are doing without any of the overspray going directly into your eyes. And again, in many different positions to get as much blue as possible on all of the undercarriage really shows you how beautiful this looks. We're going to go ahead and get this all finished up and roll it back into the shop so Mike and TJ can start to get it assembled, and I'll let you know what I think about this engine bay once we get it back into the shop. Guys, look at this finish. When I was spraying it, I was like, wow, I'm so happy I'm changing the color of the car. But you know, my job is done here. We've got the paint work all done, and we're gonna turn it over to the guys, and we're gonna be putting in all the parts. Now the guys, before they put in any of the parts, they're gonna go ahead and clean them up.
Now we got this thing all painted up. We're gonna go ahead and start reassembling kind of in reverse order. So I guess we'll go ahead and start with our wiper cowl and our cruise control module, and then start building the firewall up with our brake lines and our fuel lines and stuff, and hopefully we can get this thing back together.
Wow, and by far, this was the most exciting part of the project so far. I just laid down the Vivid Blue. It's looking fantastic, and the guys are putting back all the components of a freshly painted engine bay and a freshly restored engine, and I feel like this vehicle is getting assembled at the actual plant that it came from 20 years ago, and there's no feeling like this. So let's sit back, let's relax, and let's watch how awesome these guys are, TJ and Mike, putting everything back to Wow. It sounds so quiet. Very nice. Now stay tuned for episode 2 because we're going to dive into the body work and the primer work. We're going to show you how to mix up some filler, fill in some small areas, do some removal of some old paint, also do some metal work. And from that point, get everything nice and blocked down completely so we can lay down some primer on all of our. Then we'll show you the technique of blocking out a high surfacer, high build primer, and then putting the final surfacer coat of blue primer on my vehicle so we can get this even closer to the vivid blue paint job. You're not going to want to miss episode 2 coming up next.